I'm Michael Meneer, and thank you for joining me for the inaugural edition of A Matter of Faith, The Conversation. Each quarter, we'll be bringing you a new live online discussion that focuses on how we find meaning in life and the role that faith plays in shaping personal guiding principles. We look forward to exploring these questions with spiritual leaders of many faiths, theologians, cosmologists, entrepreneurs, and most importantly, you. We begin A Matter of Faith, the conversation, with an exceptional panel. Father Robert Allore is a Jesuit Catholic priest and serves as pastor of St. Mark's Parish in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he's chaplain to the University of British Columbia, bringing together a Jesuit tradition of discernment with scientific background in microbiology. The Reverend Peter Elliott is a retired Anglican priest in Vancouver and former dean of the Anglican Diocese of New Westminster. He's recognized for decades of distinguished pastoral leadership and public engagement. Cheryl Koop is the founding pastor of Coastal Church in Vancouver, known for her leadership in building dynamic faith communities rooted in compassion and connection. And joining us virtually from the United States is Dan Millman, an internationally renowned author and lecturer whose 18 books, including The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, have inspired millions to pursue personal growth and purposeful living. Now, you can participate in today's discussion by using the Slido widget next to the video player to ask questions and also to vote on questions. I love that feature. Now, to help set the context for our discussion today, we have fresh public opinion polling that offers very interesting insights into the role of faith in the lives of Americans and Canadians. Here's our opinion research partner, Mario Canseco, with Research Co.
For this inaugural edition of A Matter of Faith, we ask Canadians and Americans about specific moments that make them seek spirituality and faith more than usual. More than half of Canadians say they came closer to spirituality and faith after the loss of a loved one and after a health setback. The proportions are markedly higher in the United States. In Canada, Albertans are more likely to have sought spirituality and faith after a health setback, while Republicans in the United States are more likely to do this after the loss of a loved one. Majorities of Americans sought spirituality and faith after the birth of a loved one and when experiencing financial problems. The numbers are lower in Canada, with just over 2 in 5 Canadians expressing the same feelings when facing each moment. Residents of BC are the least likely to seek spirituality and faith on account of financial distress. In the United States, African Americans and Latinos are more likely than white Americans to turn to spirituality and faith when their financial standing is not ideal. Half of Americans and just under 2 in 5 Canadians turn to faith and spirituality when experiencing career-related setbacks, such as failing to get admission to a university, losing a job, or not being hired after an interview. There is also a significant difference between the two countries on seeking faith and spirituality after the end of a relationship, such as a breakup, separation, or divorce. In each country, women are more likely than men to become more mindful of faith and spirituality after a romantic relationship ends. More than 2 in 5 Americans and about a third of Canadians sought spirituality and faith during the COVID-19 pandemic. And while only 1 in 5 Canadians took this course of action after the re-election of Donald Trump as President of the United States, the proportion rises to more than a third among Americans. While only 31% of Republicans in the United States turned to spirituality and faith after Trump's victory in the November 2024 presidential ballot, the proportion rises to 41% among those who identify themselves as Democrats. For A Matter of Faith, I'm Mario Canseco from Research Co.
Welcome to all of you on the panel. We're so excited to have you on this, our first conversation on A Matter of Faith. Dan, thank you for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
I'd like to begin picking up a little bit on where we started there with some public opinion polling, maybe to do a high-level context setting. It seems to me that the Research Co. polling shows that people presently are turning to faith and spirituality when they have either a moment of profound vulnerability or a moment of profound joy. And then when you look at data that talks about religious affiliation, the US and Canada have very similar trends. According to 2021 statistics, a third of Canada's population reported having no religious affiliation, and then that's grown about doubled over the last 20 years or so. In the US, it's about the same, 28%, no religious affiliation. But interesting, the data suggests that these same people that are saying no religious affiliation are saying that they're spiritual, but not religious. So I'm curious, how do each of you make sense of this data? And do you see a shift in this data? And Father Rob Allore, maybe we will start with you.
Well, I mean, I think all of those stats are interesting and complicated. So I do think it's a constantly moving picture. I think demographics in North America have changed radically over the last 100 years, you know, from a rural population to an urban population. And so our mobility, I think, you know, it affects that sort of faith community that you might have grown up in and stuff. So it creates those kinds of separations. There are so many demographic trends that are changing. I guess it's not surprising that the religious trends are also in flux.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks, and a privilege to be here. I mean, I'd like to make the distinction between spirituality, which is broad and every human being in some way participates in, and religious institutions, Christian, Jews, Muslims, etc., which have a particular, they're vehicles for folks who have had spiritual experiences to mediate that and to understand that and interpret that. But yeah, Mario's data, particularly about loss and change in life, illness, separation, death, etc. When folks, I think, in a postmodern world come up against these limit situations, these liminal moments in life, then they start asking different questions. Look a little more within, look a little more beyond. Sometimes they choose to mediate that within a religious institution. Sometimes they seek to do that on their own. The experience of spirituality is common across the globe for all human beings. I think what religious institutions can provide at our best is a reliable and trustworthy way to interpret that.
I don't know how you all feel, but I feel like we have a crisis du jour. Every other day there's a new crisis or moment of vulnerability. And Cheryl, so maybe I'll ask you a variation of the question. You know, are you noticing people coming to your particular faith community with more angst, more sense of vulnerability in recent years? Because I think a lot of people with COVID and social media and everything that we're bombarded with are feeling bombarded.
Absolutely. I think we all feel that, especially the younger people. You know, we've shifted, the pendulum has swung in Canada where there were we were very distinct in our denominations. That no longer is the case. It's very blended or not at all. And so we have a generation now in Canada that doesn't know where to go. They can't go to the faith of their parents because their parents most likely didn't have a faith. And so now they're reaching out because they're despondent, they're depressed, they're hopeless. Everything in the most creative world that has ever been, they're feeling the most hopeless. Where do I go? So yeah, there's definitely been more of a yearning and a seeking and asking, especially in the millennial and Gen Z generation.
Okay. And Dan, we want to come to you, of course. Now, I've watched a number of your talks, your TED Talks. I noticed as a former gymnast, you often begin by doing a handstand when you give your talks. Are you going to do that for us today?
Not today.
Okay. But I hope people will go check out your talks because I think it's a great way to begin them. Thank you for joining us, by the way, Dan. Love to get your take on this as someone who's not working in a particular faith tradition, but you're certainly interacting with lots of people all over the world through your talks and your writing. So what's your perspective? Is there a shift happening?
Well, yes, as my opening statement, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join you all. And I feel like calling my fellow panelists because I'm a lay member of the global congregation, so to speak. I feel like calling you pastor, father, or reverend. But I think Rob, Cheryl, and Peter will have to do for now. Let me just address this question that I view spirituality as I might mysticism or metaphysics. It deals with what cannot necessarily be proven or disproven. And it is a matter of faith. And I would define, if faith is defined as belief without evidence, which is a matter of faith, I would say that it can be a slippery slope. Now, I'm providing a counterpoint here, perhaps to the others on the panel. As the proverb goes, if we agree on everything, only one of us is necessary. So I'm providing a bit of a counterpoint. The idea that belief without evidence can lead to conspiracy theories, can lead to... It's one reason many of Donald Trump's followers are evangelicals and who believe in many things that have no real evidence base. So they rely on a kind of faith. So it's like the shadow side of belief or faith. Whereas the positive, in my little book, The Laws of Spirit, I wrote a brief epigraph that just says, its subtitle is The Law of Faith, and it's trusting in spirit. And it's faith is our direct link to universal wisdom, reminding us that we know more than we have heard or read or studied, that we have only to look, listen, and trust and love and wisdom in the universal spirit working through each of us and all of us. And let me say this, that the closest I ever came to God was during my college years when I took a sacrament known as LSD. And I had a vision that first there was a tiny, 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 infinitesimally small dot, and it was God, and it exploded like the Big Bang and became everything in the universe. So if I look for God, there's nowhere I don't see God, nowhere. Light, shadow, all the things happening today and yesterday and in the universe. So that's my connection to spirit, and I hope that responds to this request for an opening statement.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And, pointing back to that data I cited earlier, particularly the U.S. data from the Pew Research Center, when you look at people who say, I'm not religiously affiliated, a strong half, little plus of those people say, I believe in God or a God-type figure. So very interesting point. I want to kind of stick with this theme that you brought up there, Dan, and I think we've got a really fascinating panel. One of the things I'm really curious about exploring a bit more is this notion, this idea of empirical knowledge and spirituality. Father Rob, you are actually a Catholic priest, as we can see, but you're also a PhD level microbiologist who has done a lot of lab research, taught many students, given many talks. So I'm interested if you could maybe take us a little further down this road that Dan has opened up. And how do you reconcile empirical knowledge with spiritual understanding, with faith?
Yeah, so you just pointed out that there's two ways of thinking of it, right? You said empirical knowledge and matters of faith. And Dan was mentioning, proof or lack thereof. Scientific knowledge is a particular kind of knowledge, uses the language of math and physics and chemistry. The religious traditions, at least the ones I'm familiar with, so we could start with the Abrahamic traditions, they are people who follow a tradition, right? And we have holy books where people would gather for their time of community prayer and open it up and say, here's what our ancestors experienced, and here's how they thought God was in it. What do you think? And so we have a tradition that we talk about stuff. So it's not no data. It's the data of relationship. It's the data of community. It's the data of tradition. And we spoke earlier about this idea of where do you turn in these peak moments of struggle and of joy, where all of a sudden you pause, right, and say, this is an important moment, and I look to it, and the religious traditions of the world have sacraments or ways of blessing people and saying, well, here, try this on. So religious tradition provides this lens of community experience and combined wisdom. I would even say that sort of regular religious practice is a space of public philosophy where a community comes together and says, okay, what's our tradition say about this and how do you feel about it? So I don't think religious traditions are no data. It's just not the math, physics, chemistry data. It's human experience, tradition, community.
Cheryl, would you like to pick up on that point? I'm always curious to know, when you're someone of the cloth in a particular faith community and someone comes up to you and says, prove it. How do you answer that?
Well, I think the first thing is wherever there's, whatever has been designed, there's a designer. The tables that we're sitting at, that was an idea that somebody had. They put it on paper, and now we're sitting at this table. We can put our faith, our trust in it, that I can put my arms on here, it's not going to let me down. So faith if there's a design, there's a designer. So I think at the earliest stage, at least in my experience over the years, when people are going back to the hopelessness of today's world, the first thing that they want is an experience. They're not going down the path yet of, I need to have this proved. I need the hurt to go away. I need the depression to leave. I need the pain to go. The stats that we heard earlier. My loved one just passed away. Where did they go? What happened? So they have these questions that they want an immediate relief from. That takes faith. Then at that point, they can begin that faith journey. Now they can go down the road of the theological road, the academic road. They can start searching. We can help give them avenues to go. But bottom line is, I think all of us start at this place where, why am I here? Why did this happen? And I need this fixed right now because it's just so real to me.
Peter.
Yeah, a couple things. One is, I think the opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's certainty. And what I know about science, and you're much better than me, Father, on this one, but science keeps questions open. Always prepared for discovery and something new that doesn't fit the paradigm. And that's how the great inventions in the world have actually happened, is what was seen as given, then people start asking questions about it, they're not so certain, and then some new possibilities open up. Similarly, I think further to what others have said, I think what the religious traditions offer is story, is narrative at our best. I think when religious institutions start offering certainty, then in my view, we're in trouble. Because I think the world that has been created by the energy of love at the heart of the universe, which is how I understand the divine, is always open to discovery. There's always something new. And this is why, just back to your original question, Mike, about the data that people, when they're in limit situations, often turn to matters of faith, is because the paradigm they have had, the model they have had of the universe no longer holds. Kind of like when science has a new discovery and they need to explore. And I think what the religious traditions offer is, at our best, not so much prescriptions about, well, it's this, and this. It's the wonder of story, which can open up in so many directions.
Dan, you kind of started us down this road. You've heard from your fellow panelists here. Do you want to close out this theme for us, or anything to add?
Yes, I would certainly support and agree with what I've heard from the other panelists. I remember a quote by Bertrand Russell who said, a problem with this world is that the ignorant are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt. So it seems like we're in agreement on that realm of uncertainty. We have to live with that. And I love a proverb that says, there's God, then there's not paying attention. I guess we have different views of what God may be, whether we're deist or a particular religious faith. I came from an ancestry of Ukrainian Jews, but I'm secular, brand X, generic, because I'm kind of greedy. And if I'm a member of this, I can't be a member of that. And I see myself as a member of none, but a friend to all. So I really am enjoying hearing from the other panelists and what they've been saying.
Well, let's shift a little bit. We started by talking about these personal moments of joy, personal moments of vulnerability. Let's shift maybe a little higher to sense of community and belonging. I saw some recent coverage here in Canada around an uptick of young people, Gen Z in particular, those folks that are kind of in their 20s to early 30s that are finding their ways back in larger numbers than other demographics to faith communities. And I think it does beg the question, as a father of a almost 20-year-old, we can blame so much on social media and the digital world. But I think there is something out there that people are feeling, and perhaps COVID was part of it, maybe a lack of community belonging. Maybe it's generational, maybe it's from these events that we're experiencing in the world. I'd like to hear from you, and Dan, you come at this from having been an athlete in your younger years, and then a coach. Sport can bring a sense of belonging. Faith can bring a sense of belonging, and maybe there's faith in both sport and religion. So I'm curious to hear perspectives from all of you who are talking to big audiences of all types of people about this. Is there a trend towards a need for more belonging and more community, and how does faith facilitate that? Peter?
Yeah, sure. I think the language of faith, the stories and so forth, are an aesthetic experience. And aesthetic, when I was at Coastal Church, when I've been at Holy Rosary Cathedral, when I've been other place, a lot of it's around the music that brings people together. And the opposite of aesthetic is anesthetic, things that put people to sleep. And a lot of the world, I think, is asleep right now because we get focused on our phones, we get a lot of screen time, but there's nothing like being with a group of people in a church or at a Taylor Swift concert, actually, that wakes folks up and says, I'm not in this alone, right? There's somebody next to me. There's other human beings who are also experiencing the joys and sorrows and the struggles and the difficulties that life brings. And wouldn't it be better to join hands and be together? And the Christian story, the Jewish story, the Islamic story, and stories from other religious traditions call on people to join together, to be part of something bigger. Why? Because we're all one. Can I do one quick story?
Please.
When I was Dean of Christ Church Cathedral, there was a woman in the congregation who had kidney disease. She needed a donor. Turned out that somebody else in the congregation was a match. And so the Sunday before they did the kidney transplant, we prayed over them as a community. It was a very moving moment. And I visited them in the hospital the day after the surgery, and I said, how are you doing? What have you learned? And both of them independently said to me, we learned what the Christian tradition says, that we are one body. Mm-hmm. We are all more deeply connected to each other than we imagine. We imagine that we're just these little atomized things running around the world. But in fact, we're part of community. And the way that religious institutions, other ways bring people together in common cause to understand our fundamental unity, I think is hugely important in society.
Thanks, Peter. And Rob, you probably, of anyone here, you live and work on a university campus in 2025 and are meeting young people where they are in the world right now. love to hear your perspective on this.
Well, that question of community, I think we're social creatures, and so I do think we seek community. I think there were earlier generations where people grew up in the same town that their grandparents grew up in and were gifted a faith tradition. And so you had automatic community, whether you wanted it or not. Sometimes you wanted to flee from it. But in the mobile global community, people have to find their own community. And religious traditions create this space where people can pop in and check out and say, does this feel good? And I think what religious traditions have in particular is that when people show up, there is a lens of ritual through which people can sort of bring their questions and sort of, I guess, engage at something that's pretty free about where do I go with this idea in the midst of music that you find moving, or story that you go, oh, how does that fit with my story? And then you have a community of practice. So the Taylor Swift concert, or for an earlier generation, I knew some young university professors that were off to see the Oasis concert renewal this past summer. So it's not just a single generation that is seeking these group experiences, but I think what the world's great religious traditions do is they say, okay, now that you've come together in community and you've experienced the energy of the community at prayer joyfully, now here's some ways you can approach the big questions in your life. And here's some people who are willing to have coffee with you on it. So I think religious tradition meets a lot of human needs, but gives a really creative space for people to work on their particular issues. But I think you started on this question of community. I think we seek community, and I don't think we need to ever apologize for that. I think that's a good thing, especially now that we have how many billion people on this planet. It's good that we would be good in community.
Are you seeing an uptick in more students coming to Mass, coming to you for spiritual guidance? Any
I think there is. I mean, in the post-COVID experience, there certainly there's been a cautious return to campus. I think a couple of years ago when people came back, people were pretty tentative because they weren't sure if we were going to get locked down again. But then the last 2 years, people have been back with a lot more energy and a lot more questions. It's not at all uncommon. So we have a chapel on campus where the doors are open. It's not at all uncommon for students to come in and say, I'm not religious, but I have some questions. Will you talk? Or people, I am not Catholic, I'm not Christian, but your door's open. I've got some questions. Will you talk? And sometimes you have a conversation with people and that's enough. And other times you say, well, there is a Sikh chaplain and I will put you in touch with the Sikh chaplain because that's your tradition. So people are seeking. Some people really need someone to talk to about the big stuff. But as you were mentioning, Cheryl, people are quite free to come through whatever door is open and say, can you meet me where I am? And that's kind of wonderful. You know, the tradition that you knew what the religion of your grandparents and your parents and you are has great strengths in it. But this openness is kind of wonderful and quite exciting.
Well said. Yeah, well said. You know, I think on a larger scale, I'm a prairie girl. So I come from Saskatchewan. So living in BC, when where are you from? You're from Ontario. When you say Saskatchewan, there's an immediate bond. It's almost this community that, oh, I get you. Yeah. That's a very high level community, but it's still a connection. And then we come down to, you know, it goes down levels. And then you get into, say, downtown Vancouver, for example, where there are so many that have come without family. They've moved here. They don't have their parents, the support system that they had and maybe even the country that they came from. So they're looking for some type of connection. And so could it be the faith community? I pray it is. I think it's a great place because they want to be accepted. Am I welcome here? We all want to feel like, will you accept me the way I am? So I think a natural progression for us is to go to a place that's higher than we are, which is God, to be in that kind of community, because maybe that's a place where I can know my purpose, which is huge in today's world. I think of your 19-year-old daughter. Why am I here?
They do ask that question.
They do. They do.
I know I do.
Yeah, we all do. We ask that question. So hopefully that in that community we form a safe place where we're able to ask those questions. Why am I here? So for the people in your congregation, for the person that gave their kidney,
Right.
they must have just the feeling of just being, I feel like I fulfilled part of why I'm here.
Yeah.
On one level. But they were a part of a community in order for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I've been impressed with at Coastal Church is just the wide range of nationalities of people of every, like the vision in the book of Revelation, every tribe, language, nation, and people. There you are, and the young people at Coastal Church particularly, who are connected with each other in an otherwise pretty scary space. If you move from, let's say, Hong Kong or from other parts of the world into Vancouver, oh my gosh, it's a scary place. And here are safe havens, I hope, for folks to find deeper connection with each other and deeper connection with their purpose and with their call. Yeah, and then be part of a community that can do good things for each other and in the world. Good things. Because there's a lot of bad news out there, but good
I
things.
think with the faith community, what we all see is, again, going back to, I'm from Saskatchewan, it's that upper level. We can all do good things together in the community. We can help one another, but what's the reason behind it? And we have to go higher than ourselves for that reason, which in church communities and faith communities comes back to God.
Dan, you're out and about giving lectures and talks and motivational speeches. Maybe you consider those audiences congregations as well. What are you observing in the people that you speak to and speak with on this idea of disconnect and trying to find community and seeking faith through community?
Well, one of the things that I very much appreciate about organized religions are as far as I can see, the early churches were gathering places, meeting halls, where people could not only meet and congregate, but be inspired by a talk on the transcendent, pointing them to the transcendent, the big picture of life. It's like many of us are stuck down in the weeds at the base of a tall mountain, examining the details, and suddenly we find ourselves on the mountaintop. And to me, that has to do with spirit and faith, where everything, you see a panorama, and everything looks beautiful from the distance. Life's bigger picture, and I think that we all need to be reminded of that. Looping back to Peter's comment about stories, there's a lovely quote, God invented men and women because God loves stories. I think that's from the Jewish tradition, but it could be from anyone. And it's funny, the only two prayers I know are thank you and thy will be done. To me, that's sufficient for me. So as far as gathering, yes, gathering, singing together, being inspired, which obviously we all know means filled with spirit, which reminds me, when one of my daughters was 10 years old, I once asked her to tell me, she was a voluminous reader, and I said, can you tell me your 10 favorite books that have to do with spirituality, with spirit? And she came back with a list the next day, and not one of them was about either religion or New Age ideas or the occult or metaphysics. they were all books that inspired her, that uplifted her, that reminded her of our possibilities as human beings, our potential, which we're all in the business, whatever our congregation, that's our work, is to inspire and remind people of what's possible.
Well, and the good news is to our panel is that this discussion is inspiring people to send in questions and comments. So I want to remind our viewers that you can go next to the screen. There's a widget there, the Slido widget, so you can send your own questions in and vote on other people's questions. Mm-hmm. But let's follow, I think, on what you were saying there, Dan. One of the questions we have is, what about the role of meaning in our lives? Isn't finding meaning an act of faith?
Well,
Absolutely.
the search, let me just address that very quickly. To me, we as human beings are very creative, and we make up our own meanings. We lend meaning to what happens. Healthy people provide healthy, positive meanings, and maybe neurotic people have other meanings. Like God is punishing me. That's one meaning, but there are others. So I don't know that there is any absolute meaning, but I think some of the other panelists may have different views on this. To me, we create our own meanings in life.
Yeah, I'd agree with Dan. I think human beings are meaning-making machines. We can't help but try to, or seek to find what the meaning of what's happening to me in the world over and over again. And this is where the interplay with story comes into me. So I begin to make my own meaning. What I like about the best of religious traditions is, okay, I'm going to check that out now in relationship to the story that my faith tradition tells. How do those things connect, and where do they connect in a way that, and I think this is really important, challenges my own meaning making? Because my own meaning making, I think, always revolves around me, right? Like, well, this happened because, and then a whole string of things that kind of benefit me as an individual. And I think one of the things that spiritual religious traditions can do is move us out of our own egos into the deeper mind, into the deeper spiritual connection with others and with the world that challenge the egoic meaning making that comes from me.
Peter, that is so well said. I wish I could speak the way you do. There's a reason you've done what you have done for so long. To know that meaning, and you're absolutely right, we're always in the center. We're such selfish beings. It's got to be about me. How is this going to affect me? How am I going to like this? My meaning is about what I feel my meaning should be. If we can get ourselves out of that place, we can recognize, as Rick Warren said in his book, Purpose Driven Life, the very first sentence that says, it's not about you. It's intriguing to know that the life that we're living was never meant to revolve around me, which is something we all struggle with and want it to. So if it's not about me, who is it about? And that's what begins this spiritual journey or this faith journey that we go on. What is that meaning? I want to know my meaning. I want to know why I'm here and during this specific time. As a child, I'm sure I did. I'm sure you all did. Why am I on this planet at this specific time? And so where do we go? We have to go beyond ourselves. I hope my own thinking doesn't limit me from my meaning, because that's very shallow. I have to go beyond that and even beyond other people. And the only place to look is higher than me. And so then, at least for the faith community that I'm a part of, it's the Bible. And going to the Bible, how could 66 books be compiled over 1,400 years and make sense? And where does Jesus fit in that? Why did Jesus come and claim that he is the Son of God? So if he's claiming that, and that is connected to my meaning, I think we owe it to ourselves to at least delve into that and research it enough to come to the conclusion.
Well, Rob, you want to?
I think that the way you answered, so thanks very much, Cheryl, the way you answered about who's it about, even if it isn't primarily about me, I have to figure out how do I fit into this. So I have questions of meaning. And I think we started with the idea of religious traditions versus science traditions and stuff. Religion has great language and tradition for meaning making. I think meaning will often be about relationship. And what the world's great religious traditions do is say, well, here is how some people worked out their meaning in relationship with the community, in relationship with a higher power, with God, whatever language that you use. So it does start with a about me question, but religious traditions say, you're not the first person to try and work this out. And I think one of the things that people without a religious tradition have a struggle with is, am I the first person to ever ask this question? And is there a path that I can follow? And to get back to your commentary, Peter, about story, the religious traditions say, here's a story, does it fit for you? Can you find your space in this story? As opposed to some of the caricatures of religious traditions, which is, it's about rules. Well, there are rules that are within a tradition that create a pathway, and then there's a story, and then there's a community, and you bring your questions to this experience and say, okay, how does this story work for me, or am I in the story, or do I need to create another one? And in following through different books of sacred scripture, you can have one position in one book, and a later book, someone will say, yeah, that's the rule, and that's a good idea, but you've taken it way too narrowly. So the sort of what people would call the unfolding of revelation are in these books. And I will often tell people, they say, well, what about this difficult passage of scripture? So my response is often, well, what is your understanding of God and how does God fit in that? And they say, well, it doesn't fit easily in this one text. So I say, well, you got to take the whole rest of your understanding of who God is and the whole rest of the story that you claim as your story and say, how do you bring these into dialogue? So religion, healthy religion, is an open-ended space for individual questions asked in a community, in a tradition.
Really well put, Father Rob. You make me think of someone who has my own faith and evolved over my 52 years. One of the great values for me has been of a faith tradition, and I've had a couple along the way, is learning how to be okay in silence with yourself. Some might say how to pray, how to meditate. And I wonder in these times that we live bombarded, we're all drinking out of this fire hose of media and information at the same time, maybe one of the things that faith offers to people to find meaning is how do I, you kind of provide models and methods for how to create the space around meaning. Dan, you want to pick that piece up a bit? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Well, raising a parallel point, I think it was Francis Cardinal Spellman who said, pray as if everything depended on God and work as if everything depended on you. And in the Islamic tradition, they say trust in God, or trust in Allah, but tie your camel. So I think there's that co-creative idea. And frankly, the deepest thought I could share would be, if humanity is to survive as we know it, we have to make a shift from what's in it for me to what is for the highest good of all concerned. And I think one value of religion is it's idealistic in the sense that it calls us up to our highest ideals. and to help us make that shift. What is the highest good for all concerned? But that's a big leap and a big stretch for many people.
If I could add one thing on to the point about it's not about me, and to the point that it does start with you. I'm sure we've all had someone pass away. So when you see that person's, my father, for example, I go to the gravesite, and we have the year of his birth. Then there's this dash, and then the year of his death. It is a sobering moment, going back to those stats again that we heard, because we're all living in the dash. We don't know what that last date is. So my mom, beside where my dad is buried, she's already plotted where she will be. Her birth date is on there. The dash is there, but there's no end date. So the question for all of us is, what do we do with the dash? And what's the significance of the dash after that last date is put down?
Yeah.
In faith, you believe in eternity, that it's just not about planet Earth, that everything I do in the dash doesn't just leave here, and it does stay here, for sure. It lives on and on, we certainly know that. But beyond that, what about me? And that's where it is about you, because it's about my eternity.
Yeah. Cheryl, you brought to mind when my dad died and we buried him, and my mom was still living, and we went out to get the gravestone carved. I said, "Do you want your name, next to him?" And she said, "No, why don't you just write, 'Watch this space,'" which I thought was pretty good. The way I think toward depth of life, just to pick up what you were saying, Mike, is the going to a space of silence. It's what, in the Christian tradition, it's called contemplative prayer. Buddhist tradition, it's called meditation. And it's kind of like practicing being dead for a little while. Closing down the monkey mind, because our minds just race and race and race, and it's all about ourselves. Breathing deeply and breathing in the love of God, or breathing in spirit, or saying a mantra. There's so many different traditions in different religious ways to do this. And getting in touch with the depth that's inside. And our world is a 24/7 news cycle. Our phones regularly, I get alerts all the time on my wrist. What's happened now? And I think one of the ways toward depth of living is to not only shut that down for a period of time, but to be as still as it is humanly possible to be. The Psalms say, "Be still and know that I am God." So I think bringing up this notion of prayer or meditation, it's crucial, I think, to the personal journey, to not just be thinking all about ourselves, but to move into a stillness and a quiet and be aware of the mystery that undergirds us all. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I definitely can relate to the monkey mind. We have just a little bit of time left with this panel, and I think we all could feel like we could keep going. It's such a wonderful conversation we're having here. I'd like to bring it to the personal for each of you, if you're willing. We've talked about statistics and young people, and I'd be very curious to hear from each of you a moment in your life that you felt solidified or was the catalyst for your call to ministry. Was there a moment in life where you realized there has to be more than whatever it is you were doing at that moment? So I'd be interested if you're willing to share your personal story of how you came to faith. And Cheryl, maybe we'll start with you since you're closest to me.
All right. I was sitting in a traditional church listening to a guest speaker. I had no idea who he was. And the church had invited him in for a week-long series. And I committed along with my husband at the time. We were newly married. We said, let's do this, because we're either going to be people of faith or we're not. That's just where we were at. We have to make a decision because the sitting on the fence isn't working. And so we committed to this 1 week. And as we went every night, the last night, the Friday evening, he posed a question. And it was this: are you free to serve? Would you do, if God asked you to do anything at this point in your life, would you do it? And I couldn't answer it because the answer was, I knew it was no, but I didn't want to say it. So that was a transforming time in my life where I had to wrestle through with God in contemplative prayer to a place where I was able to say, I don't understand, this is the faith step. I don't understand what this is going to do in my life. I don't know, it's scary, but I'm willing to be free to do whatever you want to do with my life. I had no idea you'd go this direction, but that was the moment for me.
You had to reflect on the dash.
I
What's
had
that
to
dash gonna
reflect
look
on the
like?
dash, and I had to have the person of Jesus reach out to me for that. Because when I would say, are you free to serve, it was, are you free to allow me to be the Lord of your life? I had already asked him to be my Savior, but I'd never asked him to be my Lord. You can have all of me. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Dan, why don't we come to you on this one?
Sure. When I was a young man, I was very much into self-improvement. I took memory courses, speed reading, I learned acrobatics, martial arts, sleight of hand, magic, ventriloquism. I mean, I was just into learning a lot in the process of learning. But one day, after doing all this self-improvement, it struck me that no matter how much I improved myself, only one person benefited. But if I could somehow help improve the lives of other people, that made my life more, say, meaningful, more exciting. And so I had no clue at the time that I would ever write a book, or 18 of them, but that impulse was within me. And maybe that impulse is what animates Cheryl, Rob, Peter, and you, Michael, and many people, but not everybody. Many people are here just to try to be as happy as they can, feel bad less of the time, feel good more of the time, be inspired. You know, somebody came up to me once after a seminar I gave, and they said, I feel so inspired. I said, don't worry, it'll pass. Because inspiration comes and goes, motivation waxes and wanes, but there is a depth of understanding that we can achieve. And so that's how it happened in my case, this movement toward reaching out to others.
Thank you, Dan. Peter, how about you?
Gee, Michael. Well, for me, faith is a journey, and there are continuing moments where my perception of the world is exploded and blown open. So I'll tell you just about a more recent one. A friend of mine introduced me to the concept of Pando, P-A-N-D-O. Pando is a grove of aspen trees in Utah. Google it, take a look. It looks like there are all these individual aspen trees. You know, they're kind of thin, they're kind of reedy. But when you look down, it's one root system. And it's a powerful metaphor that's become to mean a whole lot to me about the way that we are all deeply connected. It's another way to say we are one body. Each individual shoot, right? Like the individual lives. But there is a common source that sustains and brings life to all. That exploded the way that I looked at the world. We are not disconnected individuals, atomized, running around our own way. We're actually all deeply connected. And if we can get to that fundamental unity that is in the human beings, and frankly in all of life on this planet, which is in peril, then I think the ethics that grow out of that are more compassion, more kindness, more forgiveness.
And I appreciated early on, Peter, that you also used the word doubt.
Yeah.
That doubt is part of faith.
Oh,
in
heck
the, in
yeah.
the faith journey.
Yeah. I'm very fond of saying the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. And I'm always suspicious when I get too certain about anything in the eternal. Only God knows. And it's one of the things I love about Father Rob, the Catholic instinct right now towards synodality. This is an extraordinary revolutionary moment in the Roman Catholic Church, instituted by the late Pope Francis and carried on by his successor, Leo, to bring people together to discover truth and to be in dialogue with each other about really, really important things. And I think it just holds great hope.
So, yeah, I agree. I think this synodal movement is a necessary movement in the life of the church, and it's a maturing movement in the sense that it says that many gifts, same Spirit, everybody is baptized to a priesthood of service in the life of the community and stuff. So, and it recognizes that we need everybody at the table to make this organization work. Back to your earlier question about, faith journeys and how does one get where you are from where you start and stuff. I think I would often say, I'm a slow burn. I'm a maturing work in progress sort of thing. I was born into a very practicing Roman Catholic family, and church was within walking distance. My grandparents were up the street, so I grew up in this wonderful cocoon of this Catholic community and stuff. And then when I went to university and fell in love with science and found myself in the lab, that was another wonderful space of question and open and discovery, which felt religious to me. The experience in the lab felt like a religious experience. So you would have these moments where you would encounter something that you didn't expect, and it was almost as if God was saying, I'm waiting for you. Welcome, glad you arrived. And the other people in the lab all had meaning-making questions, spiritual questions and stuff. You're working with new technology, which you slowly realize is really powerful. And so you look around and say, well, how do I make good use of this new technology? And then you realize that your religious tradition has ways of dealing with, how do we deal with these practical challenges of the moment? And then on campus, there's theology schools, right? So you can start to go to talks and that sort of thing. So religion starts in the sort of hearth of the community and of family for me, but then it really matures on the university campus, where I'm invited to ask all of the questions, and I'm invited to ask them in dialogue with science. And you find yourself in this international community that is a scientific community, and people intuit or find out that you go to church or something, and they bring their religious questions to you, and science is a wonderful ecumenical, multi-faith space where everybody seems to understand that we can talk about everything. So it's this great space for meaning making, and then if you can bring it in dialogue with the world's great religious traditions, then I think you have a really wonderful space where you can grow. University campus, faith tradition. They're two open, questioning spaces that I've found really rich.
All right, the last question. I'm going to have to ask each of you to be fairly succinct with this. I'd like to know the faith question that each of you has on your mind at this moment in your lives. And Dan, I'll come to you.
Someone once asked the Buddha, what is it that makes you different from other men? And the Buddha turned to him and said, I'm awake. And I think there are awake Catholics, asleep Catholics. Awake Muslims, asleep Muslims. People interpret, depending on their level of awakeness, they interpret books like the Bible differently. So that would be a good closing statement from me. There is an approach to each religion and all religions about waking up to our essential unity, as has been discussed.
Thank you, Dan. Cheryl, what's the question of faith on your mind in your life right now?
In the book of Micah, in chapter 6, verse 8, it says, "O man or woman, what does the Lord require of you?" That's my question.
It was a rabbi, his name is Shakhtar Shalomi, when he was in Vancouver a few years ago, told the story of his granddaughter who said, Papa, do you know when you're asleep you can wake up? And he said, yeah. She said, when you're awake, can you wake up even more? That's what I'm in love with these days, the notion of waking up even more to the presence of God in all things.
Father Rob, you get the last word.
So in the Christian scriptures is a book called Acts of the Apostles, where the church is trying to figure out who they are and how they will be these followers of Jesus Christ. And a guy that gets called St. Peter has this experience in the house of a Roman centurion where he experiences God having, giving the gifts of the Holy Spirit to these people who Peter's community would have considered pagans. And Peter has this amazing moment where he says, I have come to the astonishing conclusion that God has no favorites, but all people from all nations who revere God and do what is right are acceptable in the eyes of God. And he says, if God sees fit to give them the gifts of the Holy Spirit, who are we to refuse them baptism? Does anybody have any water? You know, so this open space where God says, please live your life fully and richly and share it with one another. I think that's a wonderful invitation for us. And it's good for us to realize how much the early church had to struggle and say, okay, we've been here before, let's do it again.
Well, you all represent the very best of your faith traditions and the very best of faith-seeking and meaning-seeking. So I want to thank you all very much for being here. This has been a stimulating and insightful start to a matter of faith, the conversation, and I want to thank our panelists for being here today. Father Rob Allore, Peter Elliott, Cheryl Koop, and Dan Millman, who joined us virtually from the U.S. Thanks also to Mario Canseco from Research Co. and to the great production team here at Oh Boy Productions and Conversations Live. Most important, thank you to our audience for tuning in, for sharing your questions, and for being a part of our inaugural edition of A Matter of Faith, the conversation. We look forward to you joining next time, and please visit and tell your friends to visit amatteroffaith.ca for our future conversations. Until then, I'm Michael Meneer. Take good care.